conducting experiments to assist a potential future manned mission to Mars, including finding ways to recycle human waste.
Water is such a precious resource up here that we also are cleaning up our urine and making it drinkable, and it's really not as bad as it sounds.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Better you than me.
President Trump congratulating the astronaut Peggy Whitson.
Zeb, thanks very much. Emmanuel Macron versus Marine Le Pen. The French public certainly has a clear choice on May the 7th, after yesterday's first round of its presidential election. Most of the defeated political establishment has already chosen who to back. Endorsements coming in for Macron, the 39-year-old former socialist minister turned centrist leader of his own movement, En Marche. The most notable endorsement from the man he used to advise and now wants to succeed, President François Hollande.
Emmanuel Macron aujourd'hui est celui qui défend.
Today, Emmanuel Macron is the one who will defend the values which will bring French people together at such an important moment, a serious time for Europe, the world and France. What's at stake is our idea of France, the unity of our relations, our partnership with Europe and our place in the world.
Well, tomorrow, France's outgoing unpopular leader will appear alongside both Macron and Le Pen at a memorial for the policeman who was shot dead by a suspected IS sympathiser on the Champs-Élysées last week. And on a day of light campaigning, Marine Le Pen evoked that killing to criticise her opponent.
Mr. Macron is a weakling. The day after the attack, he indicated he wasn't going to promise any specific new counter-terrorism strategy. Here we have a candidate in the presidential election who doesn't have a programme to protect the French people from the threat posed by Islamist terrorism.
So what about the alleged threat from Marine Le Pen that President Hollande and other mainstream leaders have been talking about? Well, the French public seems less convinced, certainly much less than they were 15 years ago when her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, made it through to the second round. Then I watched as thousands came out onto the streets of Paris to protest. Today, there were just 100 or so.
We have to block Marine Le Pen, we have to block fascism, and we have to block this extremely dangerous populist wave that is blowing through France.
We are here to say that the National Front isn't a party like the others. It's profoundly racist, sexist, xenophobic. Too big a danger for our republic.
Well, the two candidates want to broaden their appeal away from their base, and for Marine Le Pen, that has involved announcing this evening that she's temporarily stepping aside as leader of the Front National party. It appears to be a symbolic move to show that she would govern for all French people, not just for her core supporters. Well, last night, Emmanuel Macron said that he was the true unifying candidate.
Je souhaite, dans 15 jours, devenir votre président.
In 2 weeks, I want to become your president. The president of all the people of France. The president of patriots against the threat of nationalism.
Face à la menace des nationalistes.
While Marine Le Pen made a surprise announcement that she was...
First campaign of the first round, all the system, economic, political, mediatic system was against us, and we made it because the democracy in France is still alive, and French people does not really like to be dictated or oriented in a choice. So this battle will be more violent, I think, in the second round. Violent opposition in the words, in the tactics, and in the political strategy. This global system has already lost 2 battles, one in the United States when Donald Trump was elected, and another with the Brexit. So this global system is considering in a way that France is the mother of all battles, and he will do its utmost to try to prevent France to become the third piece of the domino.
So you see this being at the last stand of globalization, and Marine Le Pen is the force knocking at the door?
Well, one must admit that the globalization in 2017, it's not the globalization of 1997 or 2007. So the world is changing. You know, the globalization as we knew it in the past 30 years has become an ideology.
So when you're trying to beat Emmanuel Macron, your message is that he is for a world that...
If Emmanuel Macron is elected, he won't be able to stay aside the new globalization to come. You remember François Mitterrand, when he was elected in 1991, the world at that time was also in transition. We quitted the state-regulated world to a deregulated world with the election of Miss Thatcher in Great Britain and Ronald Reagan in the United States. And this was the opening of the globalization. And by the way, it is very funny that the two same countries that opened this parenthesis 30 years ago are the two same countries that are closing it in 2016.
So this is your big picture argument, if you like. What about the small picture? All those voters who voted for Marine Le Pen in the first round, and those who are thinking about it in the second round, who feel they've lost out, they don't have jobs, they want real concrete solutions to their everyday problems. What's Marine Le Pen's solution?
First of all, the global picture is very important, because if you do not have the macro-size picture, you cannot be able to understand what is going on the ground. I think that Macron epitomized a certain impotency, political impotency, meaning that regarding joblessness, he is taking the same sentence as François Mitterrand: we cannot do anything.
So he's economically impotent, is what you're saying?
Yeah, and he does not believe in the political voluntarism to change the economy. We believe that political voluntarism can change things. He believes that economy is like, natural, is like the nature, is driven by natural phenomena.
That's Jean Messier, Marine Le Pen's policy director. So, Jamie, they're promising quite a fight, but aren't the odds still against them?
They are. Opinion polls suggest something like a 60 to 40% lead that Emmanuel Macron has going into this second round. And clearly what Marine Le Pen has done tonight, stepping aside as leader of the National Front Party, seems to be designed to broaden her appeal, to tell the French people, look, I'm presidential, I'm going to stand above party policy, and I'm going to be the leader for all of you. People will know she's the leader of the National Front. That's what she and her father's name is associated with, of course. But it is a gesture. And I think we have to remember that if you look at the results from yesterday, she won a lot more towns and villages numerically than Emmanuel Macron. He won big cities, he won a greater slice of the vote, but she has a much, much broader appeal than she has had before, and that makes this a pretty tight race.
Jamie Kumarasamy in Paris, thank you very much. An exciting couple of weeks ahead. The headlines so far on the world tonight, as we've been hearing, the far-right candidate in France's presidential election, Marine Le Pen, has stepped aside as leader of the National Front, saying she wants to put herself above partisan considerations. Nicola Sturgeon has said only the SNP has the strength to stand up for Scotland against what she described as a hard-line Tory government. And President Trump is calling for new UN sanctions against North Korea. Afghanistan's Defence Minister and Army Chief of Staff resigned today after scores of soldiers were killed in an army base near Mazar-e-Sharif last week. The Taliban targeted troops leaving Friday prayers at the base's mosque and in a canteen, that's according to the military. The US Defence Secretary Jim Mattis, who's on his first visit to Afghanistan since taking office, condemned the Taliban and said he was under no illusions about the problems facing the country.
As if we needed a reminder of the type enemy that we're up against, the killing of Afghan citizens, soldiers, protectors of the people, just as they were coming out of a mosque, coming out of a house of worship. It certainly characterizes this fight for exactly what it is. These people have no religious foundation.
This was the Taliban's deadliest attack on the Afghan army since US-led forces drove the militants from power in 2001. The BBC's South Asia correspondent Justin Rolat reports now from inside the army base.
Salam alaikum, Commander. Very good to see you. Okay, back in the vehicle.
We're following the journey the Taliban fighters made when they entered this base on Friday. Lieutenant Colonel Kadri, the spokesman for the unit, explains they were disguised in Afghan army uniforms. One was pretending to be an injured soldier with a bloodied bandage on his head and an intravenous drip in his arm.
So the commander's pointing out that they drove through, there's a sort of chicane with concrete defences. You weave through here, and the car came to a stop here. The officer asked them to hand over their weapons, at which point they began shooting, and actually he's showing me, so Commander, it was just over here. So he's showing me a patch of blood on the ground. I mean, they've tried to wash it away, but there's still a stain, and that's where one of the guards was shot. And on the ground beside the road, there are cartridge cases from all the shots that were fired.
The focus of the attack was the mosque. The evidence of the terrible carnage the attackers wreaked is everywhere here. The walls are pocked with bullet holes and sprayed with blood.
So outside the mosque is one of the two Ranger pickup trucks that the Taliban used. It's further up now. So they were in these Rangers, heavily armed. There was a machine gun attached to the back, and they drove up here. This has been badly shot up now. The windscreen's completely shot out. Inside, you can see blood stains. There's the remains of the IV drip that they used when one of them was disguised as an injured soldier. One of them came through into the mess hall, and I'm just walking into it now. So it was lunchtime, remember, just after 2 o'clock, and lots of the soldiers had gathered in the mess hall to eat their lunch. So some gunmen and a suicide bomber came in here, and the wreckage that he caused is absolutely appalling to see. The roof's been blown off, the insulation, silver-backed insulation, is hanging down in banners from the ceiling, and the walls are just spattered with blood and pocked with the marks of the ball bearings that they used as shrapnel inside the bomb. A large number of men are thought to have died in here.
Today, the Afghan Defence Minister and the Chief of Staff of the Army handed in their resignations. There were rumours that insiders on the
far ahead, that they wouldn't actually try and limit exactly what they're saying. And the reason for that is you just don't want to open up unnecessary flanks. The Conservative Party are currently 20 points ahead in the polls. Theresa May is well ahead in terms of who people think would be the best leader. And so they're really trying to limit too many exposed flanks.
But how long can you keep that up for a campaign that's going to last for, 7 weeks or so?
The danger when you're not introducing new stories into a cycle is that you create a vacuum and something else fills that vacuum for you. I think that they've calculated that actually the reality is there are two questions in the general election campaign. Who is the best leader and who is the person who's best set to deal with the key issue of the day? Now, I think that they believe and they know that the answer to that is Theresa May and the Conservative Party, and they feel they're so far ahead on that to have any other strategy would be foolish at the moment. But another 6 weeks of this is pretty hard going.
And presumably ministers can take the decision to stay off the airwaves. Theresa May can say she's not going to take part in television debates, but you're going to have people knocking on doors. MPs are going to have to go out and campaign if they're going to stay in their constituencies.
You are. I mean, I think that the reality is it depends on the size of your majority in a constituency, and there will be certain set pieces that you have to do. But clearly, if you have a very, very large majority and are a Conservative at the moment, you don't have to do a huge amount. I'm actually in a marginal constituency which has got a Labour MP with a majority of only around 500, and I came home tonight and there was a letter that was written personally to me inviting me to meet her at a coffee morning, and that is a sign of an MP who feels very strongly they've got their work cut out in the constituency and is going the extra mile, trying to communicate as closely and directly and as personally as possible with as many constituents as possible.
Regardless of how confident the party may feel about its position in the polls, Is there a point at which, not only by keeping silent, not only do you create a vacuum, that you also create a doubt in voters' minds that they do actually want to know what you stand for beyond what may be published in a manifesto on one particular day?
To a point, and I think that I used to be a journalist, and lots of journalists think that people pay attention to politics to the degree that they do. There was a quote that we actually had on the wall in the Downing Street press office from Tony Blair's autobiography, which said for most people politics is an irritating fog that they try and push to the corners of their lives, and that the big mistake that politicians make is that they think that they're following it in the detail that they are. A lot of people look at the situation, make a decision, and then feel, well, I've made up my mind, I know how I'm going to vote, and actually don't want to follow every bit of punctuation of a campaign.
Sir Craig Oliver. Does patriotism help to win elections? It certainly played its part in France. As Emmanuel Macron savoured his first-round victory, he declared, "I want to be the president of patriots in the face of a threat from nationalists." But the National Front, whose leader, until tonight, Marine Le Pen, will face him in the runoff, declared that Mr Macron wasn't a patriot at all because he'd sold off French companies and had criticised French culture. British politics isn't immune either. Jeremy Corbyn has said that he wants each of the British Saints' Days to be public holidays. Meanwhile, the Conservatives insist this election is about giving Theresa May the authority she needs to strike a Brexit deal that would be in the national interest. A red, white and blue Brexit is what she's called it in the past. So will voters be convinced by any of the main parties' public declarations of their love of country? Yesterday was St George's Day, one of the four Mr Corbyn thinks should be marked with a day off. The World Tonight's Paul Moss went out to canvass opinion.
They knew how to celebrate St George's Day at Shoebury-Ness Conservative Private Members Club. A singer kept revellers entertained with some old favourites, a few of the bolder ones taking a turn on the dance floor. We're in Essex, in a Southend constituency that's become safely Conservative at the last few elections. And many of the people I spoke to here insisted theirs was not merely the better party for government, but also the more patriotic.
Theresa May is definitely patriotic. She loves Britain and she's fighting for us, fighting for Britain. And I know she'll do it.
Now I've got a woman here proudly wearing an England football strip. Can I ask you, do you consider yourself patriotic?
I do indeed. We live here, we're proud to be English, and Theresa May comes across as being more patriotic, and I think we'll fight for a better deal over Europe, trying to do the best for our country.
The Shoebury-Ness Conservative Club at the moment really is a sea of St George flags. There are St George banners up over the bar, red and white balloons everywhere. And amongst the people drinking here, there are quite a few who say that their attitude to St George, their patriotism generally, will have an influence on how they vote in this forthcoming election.
In my opinion, there is only one person who's going to stand up for Britain this current time. Theresa May is the only candidate we can possibly trust in.
Why not Jeremy Corbyn?
For somebody who doesn't sing the national anthem, I find that rather disturbing.
We will introduce 4 new public holidays.
Is Jeremy Corbyn concerned about his credibility and patriotism? Today he told a rally that if Labour was elected, his government would make sure that St George's Day and St Andrews, St Patrick's and St David's were all properly marked by giving everyone a day off work.
And we will ask for the support of the governments of Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland so the same 4 holidays can be enjoyed across the whole of the United Kingdom.
That idea went down well with the 2 Labour Party members I talked to at their campaign office just down the road from Shoebury-Ness Conservative Club. Ian Gilbert leads the local Labour group on Southend Council, and his colleague Matt Dent is chairman of the local constituency party.
There is a lot of national pride which comes out through the various patron saints days, and I think giving bank holidays on those days just enables you to focus on that and hopefully focus on a positive, inclusive, pride-based expression of patriotism rather than a sort of angry and exclusionary nationalism.
Jeremy Corbyn did get into trouble when he was seen not to be willing to sing the national anthem. Isn't this just him trying to regain the patriotic image?
Well, from my experience of the Labour Party, I would dispute the fact that people in the party are not patriotic, and it certainly serves the Conservatives' agenda to say that any way other than their way in the Brexit negotiations is unpatriotic, and they can rely on sections of the press. You know, we've all seen the headlines about saboteurs trying to insinuate, really, that people who don't share their agenda are somehow doing the country down.
I caught up with local Liberal Democrats, canvassing at a spot rather pointed for any discussion of patriotism, a disused military parade ground, now converted into residential flats, where these activists were busy with that staple task of any election campaign, putting leaflets through letterboxes. Kathy Barlow has one thing in common with her Conservative counterparts here. She too is fired up about Brexit, though on a rather different side of the argument. And she also has something in common with the Labour Party, that belief that patriotism has been hijacked in this election.
The Conservatives want to make out that the only thing a patriotic person can do is vote for them and give them what they would say is a mandate for a hard Brexit. They are saying it's a red, white and blue Brexit. I don't know.
Back at the Shoebury-esque Conservative Club, though, it was Brexit that so many people wanted to talk about. And even amidst this sea of St George's Day pageantry, Jeremy Corbyn's commitment to Saints' Day bank holidays didn't seem to be winning anyone over.
What does St George's Day mean to you?
It's everything, really. I'm proud to be British. Queen Jubilee, being out of Europe. I just hope whoever gets in the power next time don't make St George's Day a bank holiday.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn said he wants St George's Day to be a bank holiday, along with the other patron saints of Britain. You're going to support him then?
Not really. I haven't got much time with him. The Tories are more patriotic than the Labour, and I think with Corbyn, you're flogging a dead horse.
That report from Paul Moss. Just time for tonight's closing headline. The far-right candidate in France's presidential election, Marine Le Pen, has stepped aside as leader of the National Front, saying she wants to put herself above partisan considerations. She faces a runoff against the Liberal Emmanuel Macron in just under 2 weeks' time. Ms Le Pen said she was confident of victory despite opinion polls showing her well behind her rival. She accused Mr Macron of supporting savage globalisation and massive immigration. The outgoing president, François Hollande, has warned that Ms Le Pen would divide the country and endanger French values. Well, this is with Bashar in London and from Jamie Kumarasamy in Paris. That is The World Tonight. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at BBC World Tonight.
Airport, really,